What is going on, everybody? Welcome back into Celtics post game live. I am your host, Robbie Tan. Joined with me is my boy Seamus Arlingo and Franco. Man, oh man, is all I'm going to start off by saying. This Boston Celtics drop a bad one tonight today, I should say, on the road in Orlando in an in-season tournament at Game 3 for Boston. They lost 113-96. We have a lot to get into, a lot to talk about. The Celtics, they got off to a stronger start. You saw Porzingis go down; he did not return. But again, we're going to get all into all of that. But if you guys have joined us, you know the drill. Franco, your initial thoughts, your initial takeaways, your reaction, your not really raw reaction. The game ended about an hour ago, but how are you feeling after the Celtics drop this game on the road in Orlando?
We have a lot to talk about on the coaching personnel side of things. This team seemed like it didn't come out to play tonight. It was obviously one of their only away games. It's kind of an outlier game in their schedule. They had to fly down to Orlando last night to face off with the Magic today, and then they're on a 7-game home stretch. So this is one of those games that the 2022-2023 Celtics would have dropped. One of those games that you kind of brush off on the schedule, and it's more of a inconvenience to deal with that type of game. And they came out with the same energy as usual. 30 points in the first quarter, always something that we look forward to. I thought it was one of the better quarters leading into the game, and during the second half, it just seems like this team doesn't talk about really anything and how to continue that energy from the first, and it kind of seems like they try to switch things up when it's one of those if it isn't broke, don't fix it mantras, but Mazzulla kind of throws a wrench in there here and there, and then it leads to that 12-0 run by the Magic leading into the third quarter, and from there on, it just goes downhill.
Yeah, this game, quite honestly, can you guys hear me, by the way, right now?
Yeah,
okay, cool. Yeah, tonight's game, or rather today's game on this Black Friday for the Celtics post-Thanksgiving, they blew the group. They blew the in-season tournament group. We talked about it before we came on here. This might be a big game for the standings later on in time because of how high in the standings the Orlando Magic are right now. And the Celtics, they come out tonight. They jump out to a 30-19 lead in the first quarter. They play one of their better first quarters in quite a while. And they're defeated by double digits, 113-96. And this is a huge, huge, huge margin as well for the Celtics because of the in-season tournament. The Celtics came into tonight plus 17 point differential coming into tonight. They lose by 17 today, wipe out that entire point differential, give a head-to-head win to the Orlando Magic in the in-season East Group C. And now it really appears the Celtics, they're in a massive uphill, and really they're in a massive uphill climb. They really do not control their destiny at all in the tournament whatsoever anymore moving forward. And it's very disappointing to see how this game played out today, considering how well the Celtics played early on in the contest, and then, of course, how well the Magic played late to extinguish any of what the Celtics did good early in tonight's game. And I will want to say what's distracting me here is a mouse that keeps falling off of my lap here. So if I sound a little bit weird, folks, this thing just keeps fluttering around everywhere. But I'm disappointed in the Celtics tonight, and that is really the early takeaway from this game for me.
It was a 2020-2021 Boston Celtics loss. We took a time machine back. It was the worst loss I can remember this Celtics team taking all season easily. It was the worst loss of the season. They came out and they looked phenomenal. And those first couple, that first quarter, they looked great. They were 2 of 4 from behind the arc. They were up by 11. They scored 30 points. They held Orlando right to 36% from the floor. Orlando, a great defensive team. They're able to crack that man-to-man defense that Orlando was running, get into the paint, and really take advantage of the mismatches they had. They led throughout this entire game into that third quarter, and then that's when the bleeding happened. Boston was unable to just get themselves together and regroup themselves in what was just a terrible collapse. And it really goes back to one person. And we have so much to talk about. My initial reaction, my initial takeaway is Joe Mazzulla. You're on the hot seat. I get it. It's a loss in November on November 24th after Thanksgiving on the road. One could call it a trap game. However, his inabilities to call timeouts and his inabilities to make adjustments. The Boston Celtics are one of the worst third quarter teams. This is the fourth time this season, an early season, that the Boston Celtics have struggled to crack 20 points in the third quarter. That's coaching. That's adjustments. That is at halftime. The coach goes in. What are we doing well? Great. Keep doing that. What are we doing poorly? Okay. Adjustments. We're fixing this. The Celtics were playing that little 2-1-2 zone press that they were running. Orlando was not making shots. The second Orlando started to make shots, Boston found themselves, the lead goes from 11 to 8 to 5. Okay, no timeout. Okay, down to 1. A little technical foul from, I believe, with the technical, or 3-second in the lane or something. Game's tied, no timeout. Boston's now down by 3. There's the timeout. That's unacceptable. Seamus was talking about how this is a game in which it has implications. It's not just a normal Monday night game on League Pass against the Orlando Magic where no one's watching it. Orlando's 10-5. They're the current 2 seed, former 4 seed, 2 games back from Boston. Boston's coming off a great win at home. This is a game you should have come in, and it was a winnable game. You were up by 11. You're a better basketball team than what they're playing. In my initial reaction, my initial takeaway is Joe Mazzulla. I mean, the Celtics have just absolutely crumbled here in the past couple games. They're 6-4 in their last 10. As you can see, look at this. First 10 games here for the Boston Celtics. Second in offense, first in defense, first in net rating. Let's take a look. The past week, they have dropped down to 5th net rating, 17 offense, and 4th in defense. You can see right there, the first 10 games of the year, this team was playing like the hands down, no question, best team in the NBA. Fast forward here into a time period, the Celtics team should be getting better as time goes on. As the season progresses, this team should be getting better. We're 16 games in. We're almost at the point where we can make our final assessment on the Celtics team, and they looked terrible, Seamus. And one of those, you know, I guess factors is the inconsistency, and especially it's not all on Joe Mazzulla, as much as I do think he has a lot to blame. But Jaylen Brown, he's coming off of one of the best games he's played in forever. That game against Milwaukee, 28 points, 8 assists, controlling the pace of the game. Seamus, what was Jaylen Brown not doing tonight that forced him to really just collapse here?
Well, it's much of the same in which we talk about on other nights in which Jaylen Brown is not on, or rather Jason Tatum too, because these guys, we talk about when are they at their best, when they're aggressive and going to the rim. Well, tonight, 6 of 22, Jaylen Brown 4 of 7 from the free throw line, 3 missed free throws. He did get to the free throw line 7 times. Want to give out a shout out for that. But outside of that, it really felt like him and Tatum were settling for a lot of shots along with the rest of the team. And this, of course, goes to a much bigger conversation in regards to the team that they even mentioned after the game on the broadcast on NBA TV for everybody to hear and see, that the Celtics take 50% of their attempts from 2-point land and 50% from 3-point land. And tonight, Jaylen Brown, of course, look at that. Right. We have a graphic for it made already. I mean, look at the numbers on this screen right now for the Celtics in regards to their 3-point percentage and attempts per game. It's not good. And I do believe our stars in some regard, how much do you put it on them? How much do you put it on Joe Mazzulla that this team continuously settles for outside shots every single game when they could be getting better looks at the rim and even getting to the free throw line more often than we see, even though our star players don't have any trouble getting there. Other guys could get there more often. We look at guys like Drew Holiday, Al Horford, Derek White. All of those guys could undoubtedly get to the free throw line a lot more than this team does, a lot more than they do. And to me, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword because on one end, you have Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. They're the stars of the team. And, you know, we're going to see great nights out of them where in isolation they're super efficient, they're scoring on all levels. However, we're also going to see these nights where they're just super inefficient and settling for shots. And in those moments, it's kind of a double-edged sword from the standpoint of whether you blame it on the Celtics philosophy going into the game or you blame it on part of the star players and just their inability to hit shots in certain moments. And from that, you kind of have to balance it out. And it's a little bit of a mixture of both, but just from today's performance, it didn't really feel like down the stretch, especially Jaylen Brown was a massive factor in this game. Early on, he did have a couple of good looks and good attempts, but those really dissipated as the game went on. And I don't really feel as if, too, why are our star players this much of non-factors late in games? Why don't we feel more of a presence from them when Orlando is on are ultimately on these runs? I mean, we look at teams like the Nuggets and the Lakers, their star players, when other teams are on runs, you're looking primarily at LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, even teams within our own conference, Joel Embiid, Jimmy Butler, all the star players to go out, get a bucket, stop the run. I don't necessarily feel like that about Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum during some of these runs at all. And I know they have the capability to do so, which makes it so frustrating. But today's game was just an example of, these are guys in which I believe in certain moments should have more of a presence and impact than they do when other teams are on runs. And that's not to say all the time, but it's particularly in these moments when other teams are making their runs, really getting their foot established into the game. That's the moment in which I really look for star players to take over. And so far, we've seen Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum on some of these moments. They don't have that presence.
Not at all.
I feel like this team's afraid of their identities, if that makes sense. I mean,
right.
Brown is going to be that captain for this team, and Tatum is going to be that superstar X factor scoring. When we need that bucket late in the game, we can rely on him to get us to the line or get us an easy three. I think they just really need to start spreading the ball around and kind of feeding into Porzingis, and what the lack of depth from this team is really what's going to kill this team. This is the in-season tournament. The Orlando Magic are probably eating this tournament up. Like, this is probably the biggest thing to happen to them in the last 10, 20 years since Dwight Howard was a part of their team. There are teams that are taking this tournament more legitimately than the Celtics are, because let's face it, the Celtics are more focused on the angle, quote unquote, but you're not going to reach that angle if you can't win these games. I mean, like, the Orlando Magic were able to play 10 players off their bench tonight and do it fluently. And I feel like when there's any slight bit of change to this roster, it completely throws off what the game plan is that Joe Mazzulla drew up, like, right when the game started. He goes into this game with, oh, this is going to work out perfectly. We can get off to this 30-point lead. We can even score 70 points before halftime. And it just seems like after that, there's no counter punch when the team responds. When they get hit in the mouth, no one's going to stand up for it. And I'm really, really waiting for that moment to come where this team sees the importance of every single minute of every single game. And this is something that's going to concern me more and more as we go into April and May.
Well, let's take a look at the past couple losses for this, even the let's past couple games this year for Boston. Let's go back to that Philadelphia game on November 8th. Boston led big time in that game in Philadelphia. They gave up that lead.
Mm-hmm.
Boston, again, they've seen Memphis, lead goes away. Toronto, lead goes away. 17-point leads in both of those games. So we're seeing this. When you think about a team that cannot execute down the stretch, what is normally the problem? Coaching. That third quarter that the Boston has been one of the bottom of the league at, you go into halftime and you talk about what you did good. Okay, we did this good. Keep doing that. But we did this bad. And on the flip side, what did Orlando do bad on that they're going to try to fix? That's coaching. That's adjustments. That is not being a one-trick pony. And I think what we're seeing right here is that Joe Mazzulla really, when the going get tough, he's not going. The tough is not getting going. I mean, it really is he is becoming a liability for the Celtics team. This roster, and Franco, you mentioned the depth, and I hate to, I disagree with you. I think over the past couple games, 10 so games, Pritchard and Horford and Hauser and Brissett, when they're in Cornette, they have produced. It's not, I don't look at this team and think, I mean, the bench against Milwaukee was phenomenal. They scored 31 between the three of them. I mean, we've seen it even tonight. Luke Cornette, we'll get into it. He was phenomenal. And these guys are giving us something. It's when these teams, basketball is a game of runs. You know, when these teams are going on runs, because you know they're going to go on a run. You're not going to play 48 minutes in an NBA team, especially in this era of basketball, in this era of the NBA that we're currently in, where there's no such thing as a bad team. This isn't the NFL where you're going up against a third string quarterback, Tommy DeVito and the New York Giants, who are, the quarterback's not really talented enough to produce a win. Every NBA team has probably 3 or 4 players that could give them 40 on any given night, right? Just from talent-wise. That's how talented the NBA is. So you're going to play a game in which teams are going to go on runs. 11-point leads aren't safe. 17-point leads aren't safe. And they're especially not safe if you refuse to call timeouts. And that is becoming a real problem for this Boston Celtics team. But we talk about depth, talk about the bench. That brings us to the player of the game. How about this, guys? You know it's bad. You know it's bad, and I love you, Luke Cornette, but the player of the game tonight, Luke Cornette, he had a hell of a game. He really was phenomenal in all aspects tonight. 12 points, 6 rebounds, 2 blocks, 2 steals, was efficient from the floor. He really gave Boston a spark off the bench that you don't see Luke Cornette really give you from time to time. And again, let's take a look at the player of the game tracker. How about that? Luke Cornette on the board before Al Horford, before Drew Holiday. Luke Cornette, and that's no disrespect to anyone else, obviously, but when Uncle Luke's going, that's a good sign. So to not be able to get out a win here, Seamus, with Luke Cornette doing that, it's frustrating. But when you look at Luke, we do have to talk about it a little bit. He's been solid over these past couple. He really hasn't checked into the game. We thought this big man position was going to be a problem. What's Luke been doing well? How's he been doing this?
Well, remember last game? I don't know if it was last game or 2 games ago. We came on here and we were talking about the Celtics running more pick and roll, and we were like, hey, why don't you throw more Luke Cornette in there every once in a while? And I think today's game against a more physical, bigger bodied Orlando Magic team, they did need him. And of course, Kristaps Porzingis. I just want to point out with Kristaps real quick that we might be seeing a little bit more of Luke Cornette going into the future. I did When we were on the post game the other night, I did mention when we were going through the minutes. Remember, I was saying, "Oh, Brown, this could have been a spot where you rest Jaylen Brown, you rest Jason Tatum. They play 35 plus minutes." When I got to Porzingis, you guys notice his minutes? They were at 26 the other night. So I wonder if they kind of knew something was going on the other night already. That he kind of expressed some of that discomfort in his calf maybe the other night while we were in Charlotte. But then you come in, or sorry, against the Milwaukee Bucks, and then of course against Charlotte. I wonder if this injury is going to be more significant than we pictured going into the future, because Kristaps Porzingis, he exited in the third quarter tonight, and Luke Kornet needed to come into the game, and he of course played fantastically in Porzingis's absence. However, it just wasn't enough to, of course, get the job done for the Celtics from a whole team's perspective. But Kristaps Porzingis being out of the lineup was a huge factor in why Luke Kornet got going tonight. And I do wonder moving forward if Luke Kornet can give us more of these type of performances, because of the fact Kristaps Porzingis, he exited the third quarter tonight and didn't play too many minutes the other night. For some reason, we don't really know that reason. However, we can speculate it may have been because of the thing you see here below. But Luke Kornet was, of course, spectacular tonight. And on the other end, unfortunately, it came at the expense of Kristaps Porzingis not being able to be out on the court.
Yeah, this is kind of what we've really been expecting and waiting to happen, not waiting to happen, but we knew was eventually going to come, was either Horford or Kristaps dealing with a little bit of a minute restrictions. But Kornet stepping up for us tonight was huge, and his consistency is going to be a really key factor in what goes on further through the season. A lot of these teams are built 1 through 10 and feel comfortable being interchangeable with their starting lineups. And Sam Hauser is stepping in. I believe he gave us 10 tonight off the bench. And they're just going to need him to play that big pick and roll. And it's kind of a given that they should be rolling with a pick and roll offense, especially with Tatum and Brown, who are such isolation scorers. That could create so many mismatches and opportunities. So hopefully they keep on feeding into that, and hopefully he keeps his inside the paint presence up.
I'm loving it. I think Luke could do a whole lot better in the rebounding and boxing out category. I think the Cornet contest got to go, but other than that, no complaints with Luke. I mean, straight up, he has been phenomenal. This is a guy I was concerned about. Can this guy be a third string center? And I'm confident in saying in certain matchups, on certain nights, in games like this, you got a guy out of the lineup, or we're playing Toronto. And I don't want to put Orlando in Toronto's category, because honestly, Orlando has been playing some phenomenal basketball here at the start of the season. But Luke is more than capable of doing this for us. And as long as he's doing this, the Celtics got to figure out a way to win games, because this is a luxury to have guys like Luke Kornet give you 12, 6, 2, and 2 on super efficient. Like, those are luxuries you have. And you don't want to waste games like that. It's like, and it goes back to their night when that lost in Charlotte. You don't want to waste a Jason Tatum 45-point night. Those are luxuries. And that's something Boston's doing. But listen, Kornet, he's been phenomenal. No doubt about it. Drew Holiday, he didn't play tonight. Ankle sprain that you kind of saw that was kind of bugging him throughout the course of Milwaukee. You got to figure that, listen, something was going on. He didn't really look like himself. His shot wasn't falling. Defensively, he was always solid. Drew's always going to be solid. Seamus, but are we overreacting tonight? Obviously, no Holiday. Porzingis exit. It gets thin once that happens. Do you think that just maybe, yes, the coaching does need to be a little bit better, but when you take out Holiday and Porzingis, you have a thinned out roster against an Orlando Magic team that's really cooking it. Is that a possibility here?
looking at the standings, the Orlando Magic have lifted themselves into a category in which we now have to take them seriously, because not only have they beaten us tonight, but they're, not too far away from us in the standings right now. And I know we're only 16 games into the season, but I think part of this game is, yes, we faced a team with a lot of depth. We faced a team that now has star players, I will say young star players, that is, who can actually take over games and put up some points. Now, I will say one of those star players tonight, unfortunately, was Mo Wagner against us, but we can talk about that later. But the Orlando Magic certainly have guys in which look at Mo Wagner down there. That is just ridiculous. 27 points, 3 rebounds, 9 of 13 against his former team. And I added in there 5 fouls. So no matter which game Mo Wagner is inserted into, he's just going to come up with 5 or 6 fouls. It doesn't matter. I believe there was a game he played for the Celtics where he literally fouled out in about 10 minutes. I believe that was 2 years ago when the Celtics were really in the depths of the East, or, I guess the play-in tournament at that point in time. But tonight's game against the Magic, you do want to see the Celtics, even without Holiday, come up with a better performance, because we saw the first quarter. If they play that way for most of the game, they're probably coming out with a win in this game. Right. They were up by 11 points, and they were doing a lot of good things, getting to the rim, being aggressive, collapsing the defense, and playing great defense on the other end of the floor, contesting shots and making it tough for the Magic. But then after the first quarter, that really just started to turn and shift a little bit. You saw the Magic and I will say with the Celtics team too, it feels like when the Celtics are dominating, you look at the scoreboard and you go, why aren't they up by more? Like, even when they're doing well, in the second quarter today, they were only up by 7 to 9 the whole time, when it felt like they should have been up 15 to 20 points. And then, of course, they go into halftime. They come out. They actually reestablish their lead. They reestablish their biggest lead of the game by 12 points. And then it's completely extinguished. Completely. The Magic go on a 12-0 run. They tie the game. They turn it into a 17-0 run. They go up by 5. The Celtics never led again. So part of this is, Holiday is out, and it's an early game too, as well, the day after Thanksgiving. That has to play a factor in it. And we're on the road. We're down in Orlando. We just came off a massive road trip. We go back on the road again. So of course, all these things are factors at the end of the day. However, you see the circumstances in which play out for the Celtics against this Magic team. They should have been able to pull out this win. They should have been able to at least make it competitive, or put themselves in a position where they weren't being blown out. Because, Franco, I think you mentioned it the other night, maybe off camera, that, this team, despite all of the trouble that they've had, they haven't been blown out yet. Well, this was the first blowout, and the Celtics led for half of this game. They led for half of the game and were blown out. 96. Yeah, let's bring up the lead tracker again. The biggest lead was in the third quarter. Their biggest lead was in the third quarter, right after the fourth. And we talked about it last game. You want to see the Celtics establish a big lead in the third quarter when they have a lead. Because if they have a lead going into the third quarter and they establish a lead on top of that, all of a sudden it becomes very hard for their opponent to dig themselves out of that hole. Say you go into halftime with a 10-point lead, you come out of half on a 6-0 run. Well, that all of a sudden becomes a 16-point game. And then if you can further that into the fourth quarter, I just think about the game, say the other night against the Milwaukee Bucks. You really look at that lead tracker, and we don't have it queued up right now. But if you were to look at that lead tracker, instead of that being a 15-point game going into the fourth quarter, if the Celtics just come out of halftime better in that game, maybe that's a 20-point game going into the fourth quarter. Maybe that's 25. And at that point, the Bucks aren't going, let's get back into this game. Let's get back into this game. When it's a 15-point game, they're going, okay, let's pull Giannis. Let's pull Lillard to rest these guys. Same thing with the Celtics. They get to rest their guys. Instead, it's a 15-point game. Bucks go out there, and, of course, they make it interesting. Same thing. I mean, tonight, it's not really the same thing. The Celtics are actually able to do what they weren't able to do the other night today. But then in the third quarter, what they were able to build upon, they completely right away. It was a 17-0 run. It wasn't as if the Magic chipped away. It all happened at once. It was like the Celtics had the biggest lead of the game. Magic led. The Celtics let's put this into perspective. The Celtics literally grabbed the biggest lead of the game and didn't score another point until the Magic were up 5. I mean, it's just ridiculous that transpired and there was no timeout called in any portion of that stretch. And I feel like I'm ranting at this point, but this to me, this was, of course, a game in which held outside factors in which we can all point at and go, okay, the Celtics could have played better under these circumstances. But it also goes back on an earlier conversation that Franco was mentioning. It feels like this team needs everything to be absolutely perfect for them to win, and that any sort of adversity that hits them, they can't seem to muster up anything to combat it. And that's a problem. That's a legitimate problem with the Boston Celtics team right now. And I think tonight's game, this is just a huge example of that.
Well, and it goes back to the 3-point shooting, I think, because when you're a team so heavily when how do I say this? All right, so when you rely on the 3, if it's on, it's on, and I think we saw that to start the year a little bit, like Indiana, right? When you're cooking and your shots falling, that 13-point lead gets up to 22, and their shots still falling, it's back up to 30. Like it goes and grows and grows. But when you're relying so heavily on the sheer volume in which we're shooting threes at, which is the highest in the league by about 2 attempts here. Sacramento, I believe, is right under us at 41.5. We're at right around 43.7. When you're shooting so many threes and they're not falling, we're shooting 36.6% from 3, which isn't terrible as a team. It's not spectacular. It's not awful. It's solid. And they're not falling. You're going to see teams. They're going to be able to get a couple possessions. When you go down, Boston shot 2 of 11 from beyond the arc in that third quarter. I mean, you're gifting them teams opportunities when you're taking these bad shots. It's what was so special about the 3. I was watching the Milwaukee game. I was there in person live. Something I made a point to myself about checking was, what type of threes are we taking? How are we getting these shots? I made an emphasis of mine to, okay, make sure I'm checking this. There weren't many threes that I didn't like. The threes that I didn't like started to come 5 minutes left in the game, 4 minutes left in the game. You know,
Yep.
there's that one pass 3. There's that ISO 3. What makes this team so good is their size, their defense, and their ability to space the floor. When you space the floor, that paint is open. It's juicy. It's the weakness of the defense. If you want to sit and play in the paint, then go ahead, Boston, fire away. But teams don't play us like that. They play us 5 out. They play us with leaving that paint open. You need to attack the paint. It just needs to happen, and I think we saw that tonight. Is first quarter, we did a phenomenal job, 2 of 4 from behind the arc. Shots start not falling anymore. You're not shooting 50% from 3. Guess what? You drop it. And something else I want to talk about, and that needs to be talked about, is Jason Tatum. Tonight, 26 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists. At first glance, you might think, okay, that's good. A lot of those points came in garbage time or when the game was winding down. 8 of those 26 points came in the last 2 minutes of this game. He got to the free throw line 13 times, 7 of 16 from the floor. Franco, I think we can all agree, this is not the first time we've seen Jason Tatum not get the ball enough. 16 shots for a guy that averaged 30 points per game. The first Celtic in Celtic history to average 30 plus per game. To only take 16 shots in which a game you need him to. What's going on with that? Why is that happening?
So I find that a real issue because Jaylen Brown shot 22. I understand that there is going to be a dynamic duo type of deal right here, but Tatum is supposed to be the one that's the score maker, the player who's going to get those shots that we need, be able to create that individuality so that Jaylen Brown can shoot less than Jason Tatum and be able to stay within his efficiency and not end up shooting his hand off. And they really have built a team around him, and the lack of Kristaps and Giroux tonight, big difference in his play style, most likely, but this is when you need him to be that number one guy, and Jaylen Brown should be more of that second option and kind of that drive. I hate to use this example, but like the Jordan to Pippen, like you don't have Scottie Pippen shooting more shots than Michael Jordan. I mean, I know they're trying to make those players feel as if they are equals, but they're equals in separate other ways, and they hold the same amount of value, but not in the same characteristics.
I think that something that stood out to me, Boston 75 to 74. Boston puts the game to 1. Magic Orlando was up by 5, I want to say. Orlando calls a timeout. Play gets drawn up. Weak side, isolation post-up opportunity for Paolo Banchero. They got the switch for Banchero. They put Pritchard on him through the switch. They posted him up. They got a bucket. Lead goes back up to 3. Boston hasn't been doing that. There are times when, okay, lead goes from 13 to 7. That's natural. Again, it's the NBA. Game of runs. You hit 2 threes, you miss one shot, and a team hits 2 threes, 13 goes to 7. That's natural. It's fine. Boston needs to say, okay, hunt the mismatch. Jason Tatum, where are you? Where's the mismatch? Get us a bucket. There are times where you put Jason Tatum in the post, and he's either making it or getting to the free throw line. So it's like, again, that goes back to coaching. That is coaching. And you see it. We have guys like Porzingis and even Brown and Holiday. These are mismatches. Holiday's a big guard. Porzingis is a 7-3 center who you're going to have to switch on to him at times if your teams that you don't want to, it's like you can't just settle. You need to find the weaknesses and defenses. And I think right now for Boston, they're not putting Jason Tatum in a position to succeed. Giving Tatum 16 shots, and a couple of those were just garbage. Okay, Tatum, yep, you shoot it. It's no winning basketball, Seamus. It's just not.
Yeah, this again goes on another kind of double-edged sword type of tangent, because part of it is coaching staff, part of it is aggressiveness by the star player himself to want to go get the ball. But I do believe it's a little bit hard when you are on a team with another star player in which, plays the same position as you, and also, the ball is in a lot of other players' hands a lot in terms of, just overall ball handling. But yeah, 16 shots to Jaylen Brown's 22, and they were really the leading shot getters tonight. They only took 76 shots, and I want to point this out too. The team took 76 shots tonight to the Orlando Magic's 85. That's 9 more attempts. So that's literally 9 more attempts, guys. 9 more attempts the Orlando Magic had to score over the Celtics. And you already put yourself in a hole right there. And after that, you give 9 shots to Kristaps Porzingis, which, of course, he exited the third in the third quarter with cap tightness. 9 shots to Derek White. So 18 shots between White and Porzingis. One of those guys, actually both of those guys, went out in this game with injuries. Derek White was able to come back. He had an arm contusion. 6 shots to Hauser and Cornette. That's 12. 14 shots to Pritchard. So between Hauser, Cornette, and Pritchard, they pretty much had as many shots as Jason Tatum. 14. Jason Tatum had 16. Jaylen Brown with 22. I definitely believe you want to see these shot numbers distributed a little bit better, because even some of these other guys, if you have Derek White taking 9 shots, Jaylen Brown taking 22, do you want Sam Hauser, Luke Cornette, and Pritchard taking up 14 shots and 2 of them taking 6? So some of these numbers aren't that bad, but it's just a little bit too much, a little bit too much for each player, and not enough for Jason Tatum.
Especially in a game like this where you don't have Holiday, Porzingis exits. Okay, JT, go win us this one. Go get us this win. And I think that that's something that needs to be addressed is in a game in which you are missing 2 of your 5 starters, Jason Tatum needs to be the guy. It's just no question. It's no question. And so, Seamus or Franco, I asked you this question before the show started, and I wanna ask you it now. If Joe Mazzulla became available, would any team hire him?
I feel like a lot of teams would take a stab at him later on in the season. So if the Celtics were to make that change within the next month or two and things have really turned south and they feel as if they can turn towards a Charles Lee or a Sam Cassell to step in for Joe Mazzulla. But there had to be some sort of sense of comfort with Joe Mazzulla going into this season to let him go into this role with such talented people around him. I mean, there are what 4 to 5 people on the Celtics coaching staff and in their front office that have more experience than Joe Mazzulla does as a coach. So what I feel like it's more they are trying to treat this as a trial and error type of coach because I do see that potential for Joe Mazzulla to step up and be the head coach of the Boston Celtics for the future going forward. But it's just being able to learn those things and generate that own sense of, okay, I need my own type of way of doing things other than focusing on just trying to let the players do what they want. I mean, he's kind of coming into this as like I kind of see him as a backseat driver to this offense and to this team. That's kind of like one of the best words to describe him. He's just sitting back.
Unfortunately, he's driving the bus.
Yeah, he should be in front of the line, leading by example, helping these players get the momentum that they need. And I get it. He wants these players to do what they're comfortable in. Yes, Jaylen Brown wants to have those shots. Sam Hauser is going to want to feel like more of a role inside this offense. And I feel like he's just trying to appease to everyone except for the scoreboard. And he's not going to do that, especially when he has Tatum playing in a minimalized role when he should be the set number 1 no matter what.
Here's the answer. This is the answer to this question. No, he wouldn't be. He would not be a head coach on any other team in the NBA if the Boston Celtics let go of him. He'd be an assistant. That's who Joe Mazzulla should have been for the next 10 years, is an assistant. The dude was second row bench before he got hired as the head coach because the players liked him. He was a player's coach. And Seamus, I asked Franco this question. I want to hear your input. If Mazzulla became available, if Boston let go of him, is any team in the NBA really making a move for Joe Mazzulla?
This question, unfortunately, does not have an answer in which can be answered politely on this particular network if we are simply catering to the Boston Celtics. That being said, we are not catering to the Boston Celtics entirely on this network, although maybe 75%. So, Joe Mazzulla would not be sought after in 29 other locations. It's just a fact. You look at the entire coaching market, there would not be another team out there vying to go get Joe Mazzulla. Now, that being said, I'm still going to support Joe Mazzulla in Boston because he's our guy right now, and we don't have anybody else. And honestly, we should all hope that he succeeds here in Boston because if he does, that benefits the entire team.
Absolutely.
But But he would not be a sought-after head coach the same way, say, Ime Udoka was by us, the same way Will Hardy was by the Utah Jazz. He would not be sought after as a head coach because of some of the mistakes and mishaps we do see from him on a nightly basis, not only last season from him being a first-year head coach, but now moving into this season, being a second-year head coach, still extremely, extremely young and inexperienced. I think I don't know if I don't want to say we forget because I think a lot of people do remember what happened in the playoffs last year in the Eastern Conference Finals. We were out schemed for a lot of that series, and along with that, there were a lot of questionable moments in which a lot of fans, a lot of analysts from around the league question why are these players playing in these particular moments? Why is this lineup combination out there in such a crucial moment? We had way too many of those moments last year. We're seeing them again this year, and I really want to believe in Joe Mazzulla in the long run, but at the same time, if I'm going to give my honest opinion on what I believed in regards to the Celtics and Celtics land this season coming into it, whether we had Marcus Smart, Robert Williams, Malcolm Brogdon or not, or now we have, of course, Porzingis and Drew Holiday, this season was going to be massively important for the Celtics because we're not a young and up-and-coming team. We're not an old team. The Warriors, they have succeeded. They're now old. The Lakers, they have succeeded. They are now mostly old. And you look at the Orlando Magic, the Oklahoma City Thunder, those two teams, they are up-and-coming teams. We, the Boston Celtics, along with the Sixers, along with the Bucks, along with the Denver Nuggets, we are in prime age range. Prime age range. Our players are becoming prime veterans, not young veterans, not old veterans, prime veterans. And in that circumstance, there are only going to be so many opportunities for your team to be in this prime situation, this prime position. And for the Celtics, I personally believed that they needed a legitimate head coach to bring into the franchise to lead the roster this season, the way they did 2 seasons ago when they moved Brad to the GM spot and brought in Ime Udoka. The reason they brought in Ime Udoka was to lead the entire team, lead Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown to further stardom. And guess what happened? That's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. We went to the NBA Finals. And what happened afterwards? Ime Udoka is ousted over allegations and circumstances and whatnot. Joe Mazzulla is propped up to be the head coach. He's propped up to be the head coach. We didn't go out. We didn't search for him. We didn't find him. He's propped up to be the head coach. We see all the mistakes last year. They fail in the Eastern Conference Finals. And I think the Miami Heat being there skews it a little bit. They were an 8 seed, folks. They were an 8 seed. They were an 8 seed. We lost to the 8th seed. The 8th seed we lost to in the Eastern Conference Finals. They went up 3-0 on us. And I know it's the Miami Heat, not your typical 8 seed, but they were an 8 seed. We lost. Joe Mazzulla returns this season. We acquire Holiday, Porzingis. To me, coming into the season, after what we saw last season, 2 opportunities slip away the last 2 years. We went to the finals. We went to the Eastern Conference Finals last year. We faced the 8th seed. We should have been to the finals. We should have been in the finals 2 years in a row. 2 years in a row. Instead, we fail and come into this year, and now we're riding with Joe Mazzulla, and we're in a conversation where it's either Joe Mazzulla or we're replacing him mid-season with somebody else. And I don't necessarily think the franchise is in for that. But to me, the scenario is not the most optimal scenario to be in at this point in time, especially with other Eastern Conference head coaches out there, such as Nick Nurse, such as Eric Spoelstra. Tonight, we even saw from another up-and-coming team, the Orlando Magic, Jamal Mosley. Jamal Mosley was absolutely fantastic tonight. I cannot give enough credit to the Orlando Magic and Jamal Mosley. But, of course, we know the Celtics, this is a bad loss for them regardless. But the Celtics riding with Joe Mazzulla coming into this season and putting up some of the results that we've seen, particularly in losses, even though this team is 12-4, even in some of the wins, even in some of the losses, this team has not been up to par with what their championship team was 2 seasons ago, even though they have arguably more talent. And yes, this is a developing thing we talked about the other night. It's a developing thing just like the Milwaukee Bucks. But at this point in time, I believe we should have replaced Joe Mazzulla coming into this season, and we're riding with him now. We'll see how it plays out. But tonight's game, if we achieve a result at the end of the season which we're not happy with, I believe this is going to be potentially Exhibit A or already potentially Exhibit C, as we've seen some of the other games, of why we maybe should have taken the head coaching position more seriously and not tried to, I want to say, I don't feel like I have a good word for this right now, kind of please the community and put on this front, because let's face it, at the end of the day, the NBA, it's a business. It's a business. It's why Kai Jones is not on the Hornets roster, and it's why Miles Bridges is. Why the Celtics can't get rid of Joe Mazzulla because he's been around here forever. For somebody who is a legitimate head coach right now, I don't know why they need to front. I don't know why they need to front like that.
I will say this before we close out the show. Brad Stevens doesn't mess around. Joe Mazzulla, you are officially on the hot seat. If this ship gets even a little bit worse, I don't think Brad Stevens will hesitate to get rid of you. He got rid of Marcus. He got rid of Grant Williams. He got rid of Robert Williams, got rid of Malcolm Brogdon. Those are guys that everyone loved. They sold tickets. Guys showed up to watch those guys. Drafted by Boston. Loved by Boston. Brad Stevens will not let Joe Mazzulla sink this ship. I promise you that. If this gets bad and if Joe doesn't improve, you're gone. Can guarantee that.
However, can I bring up another point here? And I want to ask you two both that. Do you think the players liking Joe Mazzulla and him giving them so much input and into whatever they're doing offensively and defensively, and of course, it is a little bit of a different vibe when you bring in somebody of authority versus if you're bringing in Joe Mazzulla, who's always sat on the end of the bench, like you're literally just hopping him over everybody and just putting him right there instead of putting an authoritative figure like Ime Udoka in front of the entire team. I almost wonder if that actually plays out terribly for the Celtics because of the fact all the players like him. Like, we're not going to get into a situation where it's like, oh, the players, they hate Joe Mazzulla. It's like, are we really going to get into that situation if he's letting the team play in a certain manner and he's letting them input their certain items into the game constantly? Like, it's going to take, I don't know, this to me, we're in a weird situation right now because this team is going to be good. Players are going to like our head coach, but I think behind the scenes we're all gonna know that there are some real legitimate flaws.
Oh, 100%. And again, we're probably going to win 60 games. We're probably going to get back to the Eastern Conference Finals. And honestly, we'll probably make the NBA Finals. But with this roster, where the league is right now, those probablys should not be probablys. They should be definitelys. And the reason why it is a probably is because of the head coach. However, the Boston Celtics dropped a brutal one on the road here, 113-96 to the Orlando Magic in the third game of the in-season tournament. Boston falls to 2-1 with an even point differential as the Orlando Magic jump to 3-1 with a plus 17 point differential. The Boston Celtics will play the Chicago Bulls on, I believe, Tuesday night next week at the Garden. They will need to win that game by at least 17 points if they want a chance to get the group back. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Rob. Next to me is Seamus and my boy Franco right below me, guys.
Got